Je voudrais d'abord prévenir le public qu'on va faire l'interview en anglais. So I'm going to ask John to speak slowly and as clearly as you can. So you're at the head of one of the biggest editorials team in the world with 2,700 journalists, I think, and also one of the in a media company that is one of the most technologically advanced, and we wanted to have your thoughts on artificial intelligence and journalism, and maybe you should start with describing the different ways you use artificial intelligence and how efficient you think it makes your journalism.
Je dois commencer par parler, pour dire merci à Nicolas, merci à Pierre. Je dois parler en anglais. The French language is too beautiful to be massacred by me. In terms of what we do at Bloomberg, the way that artificial intelligence has come into all the things we do, it's really across quite a wide scale. And the most obvious bit is in terms of using robots, using machines to do just basic news that you can repeat. So when I arrived at Bloomberg from The Economist 4 years ago, there was a team of people called speed journalists, and their job was to look at the earnings of companies and to put out headlines very quickly. And so they would do this by hand. Sometimes they would prepare things in advance, but it was all about being quick. And now, 4 years later, what happens is they sit the previous night and teach the computer what to look for, what to scrape from the results when they come in. So if you want an example, I think on November the 8th, it was Société Générale. And what they do the previous night is you look at the results, you look at the likely forecasts for what Société Générale will do. You go through, you tell the computer to look for things, and within 2-3 seconds, the computer will spit out a kind of story with all the main bits of data. But then another minute goes by, and the journalist then adds human intelligence to it, points out some things. But these are all, maybe 20 minutes later, you start thinking about how you update it. But what's interesting to me is it isn't something where computers come in and replace journalists. The two have to work together. The computer cannot know in advance what to look for in Société Générale, and it is unable usually to find things like the chairman resigns or there is a completely new thing. So it's a complicated relationship.
Right. And do you do that for all the earnings of all companies?
We do that for all the main, yes.
Okay.
We do, and it's more at the moment Europe and America than Asia, but we will do it everywhere. And now we are also doing economic data. Computers are very good at looking for things that you can repeat and where you can compare data. And what's interesting is in that example, is in some ways it also makes the journalistic job both a little bit more interesting and harder. Because when I first came, there was a sort of job you could do. After 20 minutes, roughly, you could look at all the bits of data that had come through, and you could write a story that said, here's Société Générale, it looks like its equities division has done better. And you could get a quotation from an analyst saying, good results, bad results. Now, within about 3 or 4 seconds, the computer, helped by humans the previous evening, is pushing out something much quicker. So when you are the person who writes about that bank or writes about that company, after 20 minutes, you have to ask yourself the basic question, what does this mean? And so you can't just put out a simple story because all the data is done within seconds.
Yes. And when there's something special that is announced, like a chief executive resigning or the selling of a subsidiary, do you think the system is ready to pinpoint it to journalists or to do a first draft of something, or how far are we from that?
There's quite the big growing area I would describe as signaling. And at the moment, we do one bit of it very well, and the other bit you can see, and it's not just Bloomberg as well, everyone else is trying to do the same thing too. But the one bit of signaling is we have a lot of computers and journalists looking around the world continually over social media. And so you look for words like, in bad and good ways, you look for words like explosion, or you look for words like resignation. You look for, in our case, you look for anything that might have an effect on the economy, on the markets underneath. And so what can happen is that I think it's 500 million tweets a day we will scour. And then when we find something, the computer will alert the journalists to look, something is happening. But then the journalists have to make two decisions. One, does it look real? And then secondly, much more important, is it true? So there was an example earlier this year of a natural gas explosion where you could see it on social media. You saw police talking about it. But you can only verify it with humans. And that is a question. You see, Nicholas Madeleine, you see a particular journalist you trust, and then you go ahead with it. But that's one bit. But the other, that's one element of signaling, and we do that, and other people do that. And that is actually fantastically efficient. But the second bit, which is harder, I think, but will come, and you can see it a little bit on sports journalism, if you can see it a little bit on football. Computers will scour information looking for data. In our case, we look for why is it strange that at this precise moment Société Générale has moved ahead of BNP, or whichever way round it is. And you as a journalist will get sent a message by the computer saying, look, this data has happened. Do you want to write a story about it? And that is still in its infancy. Yes, but that is another area.
That's what you call prompting thoughts.
It's prompting, signaling.
Yes, and do you use that a lot
we are using,
already?
We use a lot in terms of the news, in terms of scouring the computer, scouring the internet and finding things. But again, the verification is incredibly important and has to really be done by humans. In terms of signaling, telling you that bits of data have changed. It could be that one country's GDP has got bigger than another's. Does that matter? And what's interesting is I think it will change the relationship between editors and journalists, because journalists will get given, effectively you get given questions the whole time. Do you want to write about this? And then what happens is the editors come back and say, well, why didn't you write about that? Or maybe you should have done, or whatever. And that is changing. So that's another area. I think there's also the technique of journalists. We are beginning to look at things. We all take notes. Well, you can now take a tape recorder, go back, press a button, and computers will be able to transcribe that into notes. That is coming in some shape or form. And you can also see it in the way you translate things automatically into other languages. One day this will be done by machine.
Right. The transcript, I'm quite interested in.
Yes, I know. Well, think how much time that would save everybody who takes a tape recorder. There are simple things like that you can do. And
are you doing that already?
That we will start doing soon. We can do it a little bit. Computers are getting much better. Look at Siri or your phone. You can talk into your phone and it can transcribe it. And in most of these instances, people on the other end, in our case people who are paying a lot of money, they will accept tiny variations in accuracy. If the machine doesn't hear something correctly, they don't mind too much. I did an interview like this in China last year, and in the background you had a computer automatically translating what the Chinese government official was saying quicker on a screen beside me
before he said
than in my ear. Exactly. Yes, before you said it. Yeah, that happens in China. I suppose the other area, which is, if signaling is an area which everyone's just beginning to develop, and you can see it a little bit even, again, look at sports journalism. You can see at the bottom of a television screen, it's suddenly giving you a lot of data about how much one side has possession of the football, all those sort of things. It's beginning to work. The other big bit, which I think we are all just beginning, is personalization, is the idea of targeting what you write towards people. Doesn't change what you write, but the delivery of how you get there. And I think everybody has been pursuing this idea that you can have a newspaper for you. And we have some within the terminal side of Bloomberg. We have products that do that because we know which companies people own shares in, so we can deliver them stories about those. They can sign up for particular things, but on the broader web, a lot of people are trying this, but it doesn't seem to have worked. Nobody's really mastered it, I think.
Okay, and I think also it's used to target readers, and you told me that The Economist is good at that. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I used to work at The Economist. I think The Economist is very good particularly on the sales side, where you're bringing in, and again, I'm out of date, and there may well be people from The Economist here who could tell me better. But on the consumer side, what they have been very good at, and also the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, everyone who is building up a paywall audience, you tend to look, you see that somebody is reading one story, and then you give them another story which looks similar, and then you start looking for ways to make them pay, or trying to make them, push them towards your paywall. And if you are clever, you will work out that Nicolas is incredibly rich and powerful, and so you will maybe allow him one free story whilst I'm poor and whatever, and you allow me 10 because you think I'm never going to get it.
Nicolas, we have maybe 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we'll ask the room if you have questions. Maybe we will have time for 1 or 2 more questions from the room.
Okay. Can you tell us about the team? How many people there are in artificial intelligence and Bloomberg? What's their profile? How do they work together between technology and journalism?
It's a little hard to say that precisely. In Bloomberg,
and how big an investment it is? Can every company afford that?
I think it is a large investment. Within Bloomberg, for instance, on the people who are looking around the internet for bits of information to come in, that's about 30 to 40 people. And you do tend to get a slight mixture of people who come from technology and people who come from journalism, but the two begin to merge quite quickly. Yes, it does require investment, and that requires having people who are prepared to pay for it. But in our case, it is worth gigantic amounts of money for people to know things 2-3 seconds ahead of other people, so they are willing to pay.
But they're engineers, the people who do the artificial intelligence.
Engineers will do the artificial intelligence, as in how do you make a computer work. That is for engineers. Yes. But you need journalists to say, this is the bit we need it to look for. Yeah, so the two work together. And it tends to be less kind of engineers like engineers. It tends to, the people who are interested in this tend to be technologists who are interested in news as well. Right. So there is a merger going on.
Okay. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions?
Il faut se lancer. En français, on peut traduire automatiquement. Il y a une main qui s'est levée.
Yes, hello, thank you to be here with us. I just wanted to know how has the journalist reacted to the introduction of IA in your newsroom?
I think what happens in general is the journalists, when they first see this, they have sort of a mild panic because everyone writes stories about journalists being replaced by robots. But then actually you look at what happens is that they start doing it, and then they realize that actually the boring bits of their jobs, because actually, sitting there, trying to remember exactly what the estimate for Société Générale's earnings were against the actual number, you can take away a lot of the drudgery of journalism. And then your job then comes to say, what does this mean? And so you take away some of the bad bits. And the other thing is that so far it doesn't, this has not been replacing jobs in a massive way, because you need people. You need people to sit there and tell the computer what to do. And then secondly, even when the computer finds things, you still need journalists to look to say, is this important? So it's not one of those areas which have sort of massively replaced jobs. So in a strange way, I think it's like, yes, definitely. When I first arrived, people were slightly frightened of it, but now they're better with it.
Don't journalists feel it raises the bar? You have to be able to do clever comments.
That is probably the biggest thing. Looking forward for me, I mean, my argument throughout this has been that actually it makes the things where journalists can make a difference become that much more important. If you, to use, and I'm purely using Société Générale as an example, if you have somebody who really understands what's happening at Société Générale, has talked to everybody there, their ability to be able to comment on the results is fantastically powerful. And in our case, the place where we really make our money, so to speak, is with people who go out and break news. So if somebody, to give an example, and this happened before I arrived, in our case, we discovered that the Swiss bank, or wrote it quicker than anyone else, the Swiss central bank was decoupling the Swiss franc from the euro. Well, by the time some other news organizations had done that, I think $1 trillion had changed hands. That is all to do with a human seeing something, or when we say that this company is going to merge with that company. IBM bought a company the other day. You can see the share prices change gigantically. You can only get that by being a reporter. And I think what's happening is the computers will do the more mundane things, but you will need ever better reporters, ever better commenters to do the other things.
One more question from the room. Yes.
Good morning, Malika Suir. You used to work for The Economist. Would you say that print is nearly dead, partly because of computers?
No, I think print is... I was always intrigued, again, this is an old example from The Economist, but at The Economist, when we launched our iPad edition, and we had a sort of digital edition and a print edition, or you could buy both. And I'm going to get the numbers wrong because it was 4 years ago. But in rough terms, it cost you 150 euros to get both, and 130 euros to get either the print edition or the digital edition. So that we were trying to get people to do both. And most people, just over half, went for both. But the interesting thing was that young people, just as you would expect, went quite, the majority of young people, as you would no doubt expect, went for the print. And the reason why was that actually young people quite liked, it may be a status symbol, it may be whatever it was, but print is still a very useful medium to do some things in. For magazines, it works. I think digital is beginning to win the morning because you get up in the morning and you look at your phone. But there are still, at the weekend, if you're lying on a sofa trying to read something, it's probably easier. There are still areas where print really works, and you get the serendipity of being able to see one story beside another one, which is harder on a phone. So I don't think print is going to disappear. And actually, I think from a journalist point of view, or from a business point of view, again, go back to that example I used, editor's job is to put things in front of people and then let the audience decide. Because really, in the end, the audience I've mostly catered to in my editorial life have been people for whom time is the most important thing. And there are certain things where it's easier to look at something in print than it is on the computer. So we have Business Week, which is also in print and also digital.
John, thank you very much for the good news you delivered to us. The first one being that AI is not the enemy of reporters. I like it. And the second one is that print is not totally dead. Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Nicolas.
Thank you.